Resident Evil is a series that has gone through lots of phases. First, it was a revolutionary survival horror series that changed gaming forever with its creepy atmosphere and horrifying undead monsters of the first few games. The puzzles were cryptic and clever, while the settings of police stations and mansions were vast while also somehow still claustrophobic. Then the series became best known for its blend of action and horror with 4, 5, and 6. Some of those games were received better than others due to the growing emphasis on action, but eventually Resident Evil would return to its survival horror roots with the 7th game in the series, while also sporting a nice first-person perspective that was a little more in line with what was hot in horror games of the time. Since then, the modern era of Resident Evil has continued with the remake of 2 and 3 on the way. So where do we go from here? Well, aside from the obvious sequel of RE7 that I'm still hoping to see one day, a Resident Evil Code Veronica remake would certainly be an interesting game to see and would go nicely with the remakes of 2 and 3. Code Veronica is often overlooked during discussions of the original few games, yet also not quite considered to be part of the modern era of the more action-heavy games. It follows many of the design choices and development philosophies of the original games, but thanks to the added power of the console generation it was designed for, it features bigger levels and environments are rendered in real time along with the characters, unlike the pre-rendered backgrounds of the games from the 90s. It does still have tank controls and largely feels like an old-school Resident Evil game though, so because of all of this, Code Veronica is sort of in a league of its own, caught between two different eras of the series, but still more than deserving of the remaster treatment for a multitude of reasons. First off, Code Veronica would sell very well, and there's no understating the importance of that. While it might be overlooked in some circles, there are still several different generations of gamers that distinctly and gleefully remember playing Code Veronica at some point. This is because, in part, Code Veronica was on so many different systems. It started off on the Dreamcast, then made its way to the PlayStation 2 and GameCube in an enhanced version with some new voice acting and a few other tweaks. Then it even got an HD remastered version for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 with proper 1080p resolution and an improved dynamic lighting system. Even the PS4 got a version through its PS2 Classics format, trophies and all. It's also available on the Xbox One through backwards compatibility with the 360 library. This makes Code Veronica easily one of the most thoroughly distributed entries in the entire series. Gamers from the year 2000 all the way to 2020 have likely owned at least one system on which it could be played. However, as most Resident Evil heads who have played through Code Veronica would tell you, the minor tweaks it has received over these 2 decades are not nearly what the game deserves. With the sales of the remake of 2 and the expected sales of the 3rd game's remake being what they are, despite both of these original games given far fewer platforms to live on than Code Veronica, the potential success of a full-on Code Veronica remake could be quite alluring to Capcom that seems to really have their finger on the pulse of what their fans want right now. There are plenty of good fan-centric reasons for it to exist, but the monetary one is hard to ignore. Another good reason why the remake of Code Veronica deserves to exist, and perhaps a more important one to fans of the series, Code Veronica is arguably the real sequel to Resident Evil 2. Sure, Resident Evil 3 definitely takes place in that same world and in the same time frame as Resident Evil 2, and it's very relevant to the timeline of the series as a whole. But Code Veronica is the true continuation of Claire Redfield's journey to find her long-lost brother Chris. Anybody who found themselves attached to that storyline back in the late 90s was sure to find a way to play through Code Veronica. So it would logically follow that anybody who was a fan of the RE2 remake would likely be interested in a Code Veronica remake to see the next chapter in Claire's adventure through zombie-riddled madness. Especially younger gamers who today find the tank controls and the obtuse combat to be just too dated to get into, and whose only experience with Resident Evil games will likely be the modern iterations. Not only is Code Veronica the next chapter, but it actually answers most of the questions posed by RE2, whereas RE3 pretty much just sidesteps them. The unlockable battle mode after the main game would also lend itself well to the RE engine, which has more than proven itself fantastic for first-person games with the excellent Resident Evil 7. On top of the potential sales and the placement of Code Veronica in the Resident Evil mythos, this game would just translate better into a modern game than any other classic title. The game's length is well over 10 hours, which is far more than the previous games, so little to no padding would be required to make a Code Veronica remake feel like a modern game. Plus, since the environments are all in true three-dimensional space, there's no reason why many of the levels couldn't be pulled up and used as a far more accurate blueprint of the remake than what they had to work with on RE2 and RE3, where they pretty much just had to start from complete scratch since those environments were technically just flat images. This will make the Code Veronica remake potentially much easier to put together and possibly reduce development time and cost for Capcom. As the real sequel to Resident Evil 2, at least in terms of its story, and one of the more commonly played Resident Evil games over the last 20-year span of the series, Code Veronica certainly deserves its own moment in the remake spotlight. While Resident Evil 4 and the games beyond still feel relatively modern and accessible for modern gamers' sensibilities, Code Veronica, despite all the modernizations it has over the earlier installments, still plays like one of those older games, and as we discussed, that relegates it to the same audience of people who are willing to trudge through its various antiquated mechanics to see the adventure through. As a Resident Evil and Code Veronica fan, these minor tweaks around the edges the game has been given over the last 20 years simply won't do anymore. If the game is to live on any longer than it already has, it should do so in the form of a brand new remake. New voice acting, new character models, new music, the works. For all of the years of survival horror enjoyment it has given its millions of fans over all these years, a proper remake is honestly the least it deserves. Let's just hope that Capcom agrees. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed and would like to see more, feel free to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to ensure you'll be notified when new videos go up.